when I look at people streaming over the border, I'm like, hey, we should probably check at a minimum, like, do you believe in the country that exists, or are you coming in to remake the country over? Because otherwise we end up in a values war. And I'm not even saying my values are right. I'm just saying that people are going to fight for their values.
Yes.
Now, I have a value system that forces me to say, well, you want human flourishing. And if your value system is suboptimal at delivering human flourishing, you should update your belief system.
Yes.
So I'm super here for that. But I don't think that you get there by just randomly dumping people from all over the world with no filtering mechanism whatsoever and just like fingers crossed, hope for the best.
Agreed.
Given that I think that Thomas Sowell is right, that you actually have to overcome all that diversity.
And everyone used to know that was a bad idea, right? That didn't used to be a quote unquote right-wing position, right? Everyone, Democrat, Republican.
Border or diversity?
Oh, sorry, the border.
Yeah. Because I think people have because diversity feels so good, like it feels so right. For me anyway, the way I was raised, whatever, the way I'm hardwired, that is a heartwarming belief that I love the most.
I'll tell you what, I think people have a very shallow understanding and usage of diversity these days. I think it's become this buzzword, which is oftentimes, I mean, when it's used by certain people, certain progressives, for example, they really just mean different skin color, genders, and sexualities, but you all think the same way, right? That's really what they mean. Because as soon as there's someone who's a black or brown conservative, they're not big fans, right? Or when someone steps outside their, very quite rigid ideology, it's not a very liberal ideology. They're not huge fans of freedom of speech even. They don't like that. So I think that I get asked a lot about, the sort of diversity question. The first thing is, maybe there's multiple things to say. The first thing is that I think that natural diversity is generally good.
What's natural diversity?
Diversity that the human beings is a diverse species. And so if you have a meritocracy and you have fairness and reasonable access and equality of opportunity, you will naturally get diversity. If you run
thought
of everything, if you run a company or you have a sports event or a music event or anything, and you just are like, we just want the best people. We want the fastest runners. We want the best basketball players. We want the best programmers. We want the best engineers or whatever. There is a natural level, because talent is distributed. It's not just like, oh, okay, all the people from this place or of this skin color or of this nationality are just all the best at this thing. And so they all go in there. There's just a natural level of diversity that takes place. You don't need to have quotas or affirmative action or try to force it in this direction or that direction. Talent is distributed. Is it completely equally across all groups? No. And people have different interests and proclivities and backgrounds. You want to make it even more obvious, just look between the two genders. Okay? Males and females, right? Like, we have different interests. We have generally across, as whole populations, we have different strengths and weaknesses. There are certain fields where, okay, if you just take the best people out of the people who are interested in it, you're going to end up with 95% men and 5% women in this. And in this area, you're going to end up with 95% women, 5% men, and so whatever. My personal view is, as long as no one's being unfairly discriminated against, then cool. Let people do what they want to do. I'm not on the bandwagon of, hey, we need to get everything 50-50 and make sure everything perfectly reflects the population, because you can't do that without actual sexist and or racist policies to discriminate against people who are more likely to go into that area. If you want 50% of airline pilots to be female, you will have to unfairly discriminate against men.
Let's say, though, that you're not stupid, and so you're not going to try to get everything to equal the population. That is a child's view of how to make this work. But you really do look out at the world. I'll give you the easy one. Okay. So you look out at the world and you realize that certain zip codes have terrible fucking education. And so it's like, oh, okay, that's broken. And because of the history of slavery in the country, that you started this feeder system of people into a broken system. And I know I'm making, because obviously there was a moment where it really looked like blacks were going to escape and Black Wall Street and all that. Like, I'm way oversimplifying. But nonetheless, a stretch of people, whether white, black, otherwise, doesn't matter. They find themselves in poverty. And now they're just in a poverty creation machine.
Yes.
And that is the zip code that they're born into. And so now you're like, it would be absurd to get equal percentages everywhere. But at the same time, I actually do want to fix the real fucking problem.
Yep.
So how do we do that?
I think you go to the root of the problem. Okay. Something like 72% of Black Americans born in this country are born to unmarried parents. That is a problem. Only 28%-ish, 25 to 28% being born to married parents. That is a gigantic issue. People don't like to talk about this because it makes people uncomfortable and certain people feel convicted or feel like you're attacking them or something like that. But if you can't talk about a problem openly, you certainly have no chance of fixing it. So that is one of the roots of the issue. The family structure. What are the environments people are growing up in? Is there even a father in the home? Are there fathers in the community? If the answer is mostly no, you can actually just accurately predict everything from education success to long-term income to incarceration rates, crime rates, poverty rates, so on and so forth. They're all correlated. You find the communities with the highest rates of intact families and fathers in the households. They also, lo and behold, they have the lowest incarceration rates, highest incomes, highest educational attainment, and so on and so forth. So these things are, firstly, you have to be able to like really just be truthful about the issue and get to the core of it and all the different factors, right? I'm not saying that's the one factor. I'd say it's certainly one of the biggest, if not the biggest. And that's also a multi-generational fix. It didn't happen overnight like that, and you can't just fix it like that. And it's not something that you just make a political policy which suddenly improves it. So I think I'm speaking here as a foreigner, but as a foreigner who cares about the USA and does want to see people flourish across the board. And I think in that specific situation, I think you need the long-term solution, which is, okay, let's look right at the root. Let's look right at the root of this and see what's going on here. And let's have a multi-decade plan to remedy this. And then you might need to have some type of interim solution. I know that a lot of conservatives here talk about school choice. That's not something I've looked into that much. You certainly need to invest in improving certain schools and communities. If it's just like, okay, this is a poor area and therefore all the schools suck, that shouldn't necessarily be the situation, right? And it doesn't have to be. That's not an inevitable situation that, oh, this is a poor community, so the schools are just garbage, right? No, I don't think Americans should just accept that. I don't think they should just accept and tolerate that. This is the richest country in the world. We've got trillions and trillions and trillions in debt, but also
a lot more trillions, right?
But also being sent overseas and going to the military-industrial complex and so on. Like, there's so much wasteful spending.
That's like, my point. This is what's driving the question.
Yes, let's redirect this towards our own citizens. I'm not American, but I am America first for Americans, right? That shouldn't be some controversial thing or some things that's viewed as some fringe right-wing view or something. It's like, no, these are the citizens. These are the taxpayers. Mm-hmm. So that money and funding, the education's a really basic foundational thing. If the next generation of Americans coming up is not well educated, and a lot of them don't even know how to read and write properly and do basic math, like, that's not, the things ain't looking good in 30, 40, 50 years if that's the situation across millions and millions of people. And I don't think it's a gigantic ask that, hey, how about we make it so that every American child graduating from 9th grade can read and do math properly? I don't think that's like a crazy utopian, like that should be basic. In most countries, that's basic. That's like, yeah, of course they can read and they can do math and they have basic understanding of certain things. But I think that, I'll tell you what, I don't think I've ever even said this before, but I think in this country and in the UK as well, I think people need to like raise their standards and expectations in a way.
Of what?
I think that just because, I think people get used to things. And sometimes people get used to things that they shouldn't. I'll give you a parallel. So my family's originally from Nigeria. In Nigeria, for the past several decades, my entire lifetime, you've been dealing with power cuts, blackouts, sometimes multiple times a day, 3-4 times a day, every single day for the past 40, 50 years, blackouts. And it's been going on for so long that every Nigerian, whether in Nigeria or in the diaspora, is just kind of like, that's just how it is, right? That's just how it is. And I'm like, you shouldn't tolerate that. Nigeria exports oil to other countries. Countries like Ghana haven't had, they've been free of blackouts for 2 decades at this point. Why is Nigeria still having blackouts? That's goofy. How are they having petrol shortages in a country with as much oil resources as it does? Like, guys, come on. We shouldn't just be like, oh, well, that's just how it is, right? That's just America. Oh, that's just the American education system. No. Why should America have a crap education system compared to other countries in Europe or in Asia or in the Middle East? Why should the US be behind in that? It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. Like, this country has stupidly blessed nation. I mean, ridiculous amounts of resources, so much money, so many entrepreneurs, so much going on. And people just kind of like accept that, oh, well, like, our education system's just crap and getting worse. I'm like, no. Or when people kind of give up on the cities when it comes to crime or homelessness and like drugs and stuff, and they're just like, well, it's just like that. It's like, no, it shouldn't be. Firstly, it wasn't always like that. It wasn't always that way. Mm. And we're moving in the future, not in the past. So it should, at least in theory, be getting better. It should be improving. It shouldn't be like, oh, each year, Los Angeles or San Francisco or California or wherever you are, oh, it's just like declining. You're paying more in taxes and it's declining. I firstly think like there just needs to be more, what's the right word I'm looking for? I think there's too much apathy. I think there's an acceptance of the unacceptable. And I think that should not be the case.